Cut. This is the podcast where we talk about topics in film theory, criticism, history, and more, because we like to. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who is actually being controlled by someone else who has perfectly and exactly copied my mannerisms through study, and I am technically not me.
Enough cardio to keep up with the innocent victims that I have to chase down. Yeah, we're back to traditions.
I'm Sam, and I'm the one who's not pretty enough.
I'm Kieran. I'm the one who doesn't do enough cardio.
Yeah, well, we got Kieran, but no, my eyes decided to just forget Sam. I was just so enamored because he actually is pretty and distracted me.
Yeah, something along those lines. Let's not inflate his ego too much.
We're talking about we've called this underrated horror gems, underseen, something like that. But underrated movies are a topic that always gets brought up in film online discussion. And I want to know, guys, what do you think an underrated, underseen, fill in the word film is? Because, you know, I'm possibly stretching the definition with my movie.
I think box office is a big part of it, and I suppose some things quite well critically received or well received by a select passionate audience, but doesn't catch fire at the box office, and that usually contributes. It crosses over with like the whole hidden gem kind of cult classic kind of area, really, for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other one is normally it's the stuff that doesn't appear on your top 15 movies of the year, that kind of stuff, or within sort of a year or two, you don't hear kind of talked about enough. It's normally the ones that don't end up on Netflix now, let's be fair. That's normally what happens. Because if it ends up on Netflix, well, I say this, and then they drop Catherine Bigelow movie and don't tell anyone. So...
Yeah.
It normally is the ones that kind of don't get the mention, and I would say don't get mentioned in a kind of general sphere outside of, let's call it, film road sphere, because we all know that those two kind of canon, if you like, are completely separate and different. You do get the odd crossover, but the films that people talk about that aren't necessarily kind of film buffs or film nerds are completely different a lot of the time to the stuff that we say, in kind of our circles, if we say we do that. And it must be said that sometimes you get the hidden gems that just aren't talked about it either. And I think at least two of these are not talked about it either.
I mean, we've got to bear in mind that all three of our films are from the last 25 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of these films, like horror classics they're considered now, weren't kind of instant successes. It took time to gain that kind of that reputation and that passionate fan base, and so it's difficult to judge whether any of these three, that they could be talked in the same breath as like some other classics in a few more years, but it takes time to build that up.
Kieran, I think you've hit on a strong point with the people who are into film versus general audience divide for it, because something like a Marvel movie, it's never going to be an underrated gem because it has all the exposure and all of that. There's definitely the financial component, but even something like Drive My Car or Triangle of Sadness, that'll get buzz in the film community. Some people, like me, might not even really learn about them until they are, in best Oscar conversations.
Yeah,
and then
because normally the films that get put into best Oscar, aside from a good maybe 60-70% of them, just make the festival rounds and then turn up in the Oscars, and suddenly they get a release for about 2 months, and you have to get them in those months, otherwise you'll never see them.
Yeah, well, and then with all of that, you have the movies that may be generally underrated, but they're so recommended and discussed in film communities that they no longer are, and it's kind of a joke. And my
Yeah.
example for that is Moon, where if you go on Reddit and ask about an underrated movie, even in 2025, people will say Moon, which is just that's hilarious. Everybody's been saying that since it came out.
Yeah. No, and yeah, the box office is one thing. I think just general kind of awareness of it is another one that goes out there. And again, with the time thing, I mean, how long ago was it that we thought the kind of I'm going to say general fan base, which is awful because the fan base is not a fan base; it doesn't like anything. But Star Wars. Remember when they were saying that Revenge of the Sith was the worst movie in existence, and all the prequels are awful, and now the sequel trilogies come out, and they've actually gone, you know what, the prequels are amazing, and they are underappreciated. And George Lucas is a genius, and it's just like, no, it's just because something new's come out, and you like to hate that, so the other one becomes vaguely in vogue, you know.
Well, so, along those lines is Avatar underrated, even though it made lots of money.
I hope Avatar 2 never becomes cult classic.
I think as soon as something crosses the multiple billions box office mark, I don't think you can have that kind of commentary at it. I mean, it's interesting, the three that we've picked, again, none of them are part of a Margot franchise, so they're all kind of individual kind of creative works, you know, original, although Kieran's obviously borrows from other material.
And they did try and make it into a franchise. There was going to be a comic at one point. They were trying to get a sequel made, and theirs just never worked out in the end.
Yeah, because I don't think anything as part of a larger like horror franchise could be considered like an underrated kind of horror classic, really. You know, so I know people advise about the recent Scream films, but you know, just like you take them within the context of the rest of the franchise, don't you?
Yeah,
and how it carries on the story and comments on it.
Unless it's something like really unique, like something that doesn't quite fit. For example, something like Season of the Witch, Halloween 3, where everyone will just go, literally, don't call it a Halloween movie, and everyone would think it's like an absolute like standout in its own right. And I would agree with that, but this was part of Carpenter's original idea.
Even something like New Nightmare, I think, was arguably different enough from the rest of the Elm Street series to.
Oh yeah, New Nightmare is up there.
Well, that gets into the difficult relativity of the terms in general, because the underrated movies in a franchise with 10, 15 movies, I mean, that could be a thing, but it's entirely contextual, where Sam might say, oh, Thunderbolts is an underrated Marvel film, but in any other context, no, you would not say it's an underrated movie. Unless you specifically mean, I thought critics were harsh on it, and it's a better movie than the perception makes it out to be, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I know somebody who had a conversation with, and I think must have mentioned it before. They're kind of sort of almost comfort movie, so they would say it's kind of underrated because it works for them. I think it was Dracula Untold or something along those lines. The one with Luke Evans in it, or whatever it was. And I'm just like, you're not allowed to have that and say that's a decent movie. You're just not, because it's not in any way. That's like, I don't impose my opinion on many people, but that one is not allowed. But they're like, it works for them. So.
I've seen it, and I remember two things from the whole film. And it was, at one point he turns into a giant fist made of bats and punches an army. And the other is that they got Charles Dance in to film like 3 scenes where he was like a Nosferatu looking vampire living in a cave.
That and there's a feeling of relief when the credits roll.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So again, I think also underrated is personal taste. Somebody might think it's rated rather than underrated or overrated or stuff like that. But I think we kind of, in general, we have to give some kind of groundwork for it. So I think it's kind of films that are generally seen as good that may not have got as much attention as other films that are generally awful. Probably the nearest we'll get. The fact that we still have so many Conjuring movies, and so many, in the nicest way, Purge movies, and all these kinds of things, which are, I mean, the first ones were mediocre at best, and they haven't improved. Whereas some of these were absolutely amazing and slipped under the radar. of perhaps the general audience, I think, is the nearest we're going to get to outlining it.
Well, and then horror fans specifically always will have a giant list of you need to watch this movie that's really weird,
Yeah.
that's really gory from any point in history. It's a fan culture, subculture film that is very passionate. Watches it
Yeah.
to maybe an extreme degree. There's all kinds of weird directions that you can take underrated horror film because, oh yeah, this is a horror film from, Myanmar that nobody has ever seen, but it's so wild and weird that you need to check it out if you love horror movies.
Yeah.
And
That was it was the joke. It was somebody posted on it. It was like, horror fans are like, yeah, I recently got the Blu-ray edition of like Clown Cornfield Massacre 5. It only came out in 1973. It only shown in 5 cinemas. It's actually better than The Godfather, to be honest.
and
That kind of thing.
I think a lot of that has to do with the production realities of film, where it's cheaper to make a horror film than it is to make an action film. And so if you're discussing, this underrated action film, it's going to be something that's a decently sized budget, that kind of stuff anyway.
I mean, considering the only kind of big films that really kind of took off during the pandemic, that could still be made during the pandemic, were like very low budget horror, screen based horror films like Host, or like really kind of low level kind of intense dramas with like 2 people in a room that really been shot separately.
Yeah, it's horror is a thing that does that. And I think just the horror fan base are somebody that will kind of, we enjoy the trashiness of things. So we will sit through 11 awful movies to find one that's actually good.
Yeah, I mean, going back to our subject from last week, that there is a certain thrill to finding something that's just a certain level of awful, like entertainingly bad, especially if you're enjoying it in like a group, and it's that kind of community watching kind of aspect of it that really appeals.
Yeah.
If this were underrated bad movie gyms, I would have some really great ones, because I watch so many terrible movies, and that's why I don't have good low budget horror films to suggest.
Because all the ones you see are awful.
Kieran, I've been watching your letterbox tick over the past few days. Why have you been watching so many Anaconda and Lake Placid sequels? Why would you do that?
I just got bored and I wanted to watch the second one, and then I found out there was a new Anaconda coming out soon, so I'm like, I'll watch all of those. And then I
meta Anaconda.
And then I hadn't watched Lake Placid versus Anaconda, so I'm like, well, I've got to watch all the Lake Placid sequels now, haven't I? So to get it up with them. So that's why.
Which franchise is worse overall?
I don't know. After the first one, they both ended up in sci-fi. So the good thing about Lake Placid is the third, fourth, and at the moment the crossover, very small, or at least the fourth one in the crossover, have Robert Englund in it. So maybe that's a vague saving grace. One of the only saving graces. They're both awful CGI monstrosities.
They are ripe for adult entertainment parody, though, with Lake Placid. So,
yes, Anaconda we won't go into.
Yeah. Well, we that's a different podcast.
Yes,
but let's see, Kieran, your movie is chronologically first,
and has Robert Englund in it.
It has Robert Englund. Tell us about this. I don't know, home video from 2006 that you found.
This was something that I was when literally this is like 12, 13 years ago probably. TV in the room, and I got it recorded because I'd just seen Robert Englund in it, and it was on there for like months and months, and eventually I'm like, Robert Englund, let's watch it. And I watched it and I went, this is amazing. This is like one of the greatest things ever. And it's been a while since I've seen Leslie Vernon all the way through. I've seen clips, but it's so funny that when I started kind of at university and stuff and doing my horror, doing the horror module, half of the terminology I knew from this. So kind of, I didn't originally know the term as a final girl. I knew it as a survivor girl. from this, and every time I watched a slasher movie in my head, I'm just seeing them taping like fishing wire to stuff and nailing down windows and stuff in preparation. And I've long since said, if you want to like make kind of my holy trilogy of kind of deconstructive horror movies, Scream, Leslie Vernon, and Cabin in the Woods, I think they make a very nice sort of trilogy and kind of deconstructing a lot of the stuff. But yeah, Behind the Mask, Rise of Leslie Vernon from 2006, starring Nathan Basil and Angela Goethals, with sort of smaller parts from Scott Wilson, Robert Englund, and Zelda Rubinstein's, I believe, last ever film released during her lifetime. So I'm not sure if it's the last thing she was in, but it's probably the last thing she kind of acted for. Apparently, there is now a Blu-ray of it. Scream Factory, I'm just seeing put a Scream a thing for it. But yeah, it follows a group of kind of college students that are making a documentary, and they're following around Leslie Vernon, played by Nathan Basil, who hasn't acted anything since like 2010. And it's a absolute shame. It's criminal because he's so good in this.
I think he's so singular in this role. I'm not sure if it would work.
Yeah.
If you saw him something else, you just think that's Leslie Vernon. I don't trust him.
Yeah. He's so good. But he is kind of the pretender to the throne. This is a world where Jason and Michael and Freddy Krueger and Chucky kind of all exist, and they're all real killers, and they're kind of people that are just kind of, gone on their killing sprees. And Leslie Vernon wants to be the next one. So he's invited this kind of couple of college kids to follow him around as he kind of goes through and sets up his killing spree and explains the tricks of the trade and how he does everything. And, along the way, we get our kind of sort of Sam Loomis figure in the form of Robert Englund's Doc Halloran, obviously. Because we can't have it exactly the same. And we meet kind of an old-time serial killer who was back in the day, probably the 60s or the 70s, did their kind of spree and got out there again, and then eventually follows them as they go towards their big kind of setup, big final slasher spree in the middle of nowhere, and it takes a little bit of a twist.
Yeah, I mean, I did think they could have made it a bit clearer who Scott Wilson's character was actually supposed to be, because I had to read afterwards that he's supposed to be the Black Christmas guy.
I don't think it's.
I see, it's deliberately vague because you do some reading. They say no, it's not specified. It's strongly implied to be. Is this? Is it? Where was that?
What, Billy from it?
Yeah. He's supposed to be an older version of Billy, apparently.
Yeah, because he's called Eugene, isn't he? So I thought I would never have said that. I mean, if you'd have had to push me, I'd have probably put it in like my top 4 or 5 possibilities, but I don't think it's kind of necessary.
I just assumed he was like fictional.
Yeah, I mean, you could have said he's from like the 60, like almost like a Peeping Tom. That kind of one of those things from like the 60s, 70s, from like a slasher kind of interpretation.
Yeah. Is he
sort
British?
Of thing. You know what I mean, though. One of the films from like the 60s and 70s, where there's only one of them. But I mean, at this point, Black Christmas hadn't even got a remake, had it? Because the first Black Christmas remake was 2010, I think it was. So it could very possibly be.
It was that long ago? I thought the most recent one was the first remake. I didn't realize there was another one.
No, because that's the first Black Christmas version I ever saw. Because when I was first getting into horror, a mate bought me a couple of DVDs, and one of them was the Black Christmas remake. So it was like the 3rd or 4th kind of horror we ever owned, because that was the new one at the time. So in my head, for some reason, that's the version I got, although I now know the original. But yeah, it's like, I love this movie so much. Like, it's so stupid and goofy, and I just end up quoting it randomly. Like, one of my favorite, when they're in the library and he's going for his first kill, he just sits there and goes, "It is going to get wet in here tonight," and I just like prepare for anything. That's the line I say for some reason. That and Paradise Lost found it, just out of nowhere, Although that one apparently was just something he came up with on the spot, and they're actually hiding in like a science section. So he had to move Paradise Lost for it, and people have gone, yeah, why are there like books on all like electrons and stuff behind him, and now Paradise Lost is in this section? It's like, yeah, because it was a gag he just came up with out of nowhere. But apparently he got like some of the biggest laughs in all the audience screenings and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I did. First time watching this, I did laugh a lot at this. I think it pitched about right, like the self awareness and it's kind of obviously it's really meta. It's got all the in jokes, but it kind of stops just short of being smug. I think it's because as you say, it's quite goofy and silly as well. And it's one of these where it's nice to put a real world logic into these kind of slash killers, but at the same time, I've also got to go with it a bit, because if you apply too much scrutiny, the whole thing kind of falls apart logically as well. So,
and I think
I'm at very much the other end of the spectrum. Unfortunately, I hate the 2006ness of this, where it's meta. They're deconstructing it. They clearly watched all of the cinema verite horror films that were happening at the time and The Office, and we're like, what if we make this into a slasher film? I hate at the beginning where they're like, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, all of these kids, it just, the whole thing grates on me, and I don't enjoy it.
Don't you think that's the kind of intro that like a university reporter though would kind of deliver to?
Yes, I agree, but you could do anything with your made up fictional film, and I wish they didn't go for like news presentation style.
But I mean that's I think it's interesting because it's kind of crossing kind of Scream with a sort of almost sort of like Henry portrait of a serial killer sort of thing.
I mean, I think this could very easily have had like the Kevin Williamson, Joss Whedon kind of hyper verbose kind of dialogue, which I think would have grated after a while. But I like that in this, it feels kind of, it does feel kind of very naturalistic, and people talk like people talk. It's which I think kind of gives it. It grates a lot less for me, I think.
I don't disagree. I could just see through the the all of it, and if I had
Tell
watched
us how
this,
you really feel, Jake.
if I had watched this in 2009, I probably would have been like, "This is amazing." But watching it now, it does nothing for me.
So not right. And it's like in my head, I've got every time somebody goes to we have our big kind of slasher spree, I just imagine like 12 hours beforehand, the killer going around and nailing all the windows shut. That sequence where he goes around the main house and explains everything is glorious. And I think it's that bit works for me, especially because a lot of it some of it is very actually quite academic in terms of, horror is now, people are writing books on it, Carol Clover, Dyke, and all that stuff have been out for a number of years now. So some of the people maybe making it or writing it have probably read some of that stuff, which is where Survivor Girl comes in. And I mean, Final Girl isn't really a term. I mean, the Final Girl film comes in 2015, all these things come a little bit later on. The idea of use of the womb as kind of symbolic and these kinds of things is a little bit highfalutin. But then it's again going around sort of the ground floor, and Taylor goes, what, he's kind of nailed all the ground windows shut, and she goes, why don't they just get a chair and smash him open? He goes, you think they would, but they never do. And that's just about right for a general audience who isn't an absolute slasher nerd to go, that's probably about right, because it's just so much convention now. Even if you haven't watched any horror movies, you kind of know that's the general thing.
I want them to come up with a better term for like the obsessive kind of person battling evil than an Ahab. I mean, I know Ahab is funny, but genre-wise, it doesn't really quite match up.
I think they came up with it for this. As far as I know, I've not heard the term Ahab anywhere else. I will at some point message a load of my old lecturers and go, is this a term that I've just not heard, or is it just made up for Leslie Vernon? Hilariously enough,
is it also something that really is in a lot of slasher movies? Like,
it's just Halloween, I think. To be honest.
It's mostly Halloween. It's mostly Sam Loomis.
Or the final girl is kind of the nemesis, you know, it like God, Sydney or Cindy, whichever is the
Sydney Prescott,
whichever's the actual one.
Not a scary movie.
Yeah.
You know, something about this movie that I didn't quite wrap my head around it, and I'm ignoring the very end because, you know, I'm thinking this as I'm watching it. So is this film essentially presenting that all supernatural killers are actually naturalistic, and that they don't have any superpowers?
I would say so.
But see, I was trying to work that out because I was trying to work out for ages. Has he actually got any powers yet, or is he just is it all like a masquerade? Because there's a scene in the library where he kind of he vaults that desk, but they go, oh, he's like a spider monkey, but he doesn't quite move quite the way a person does. It's almost like there is something else going on there. You know, it's like he's got powers, but he's keeping them kind of under wraps. You know,
Well,
I would say he doesn't have powers because otherwise he doesn't need to apply the cream, the flame retardant cream and stuff.
Yeah. True.
At the end.
I also think if you try and apply the like methodology and ideas that we see from Leslie's perspective to like Freddy, well, how is Freddy going into people's dreams naturalistically? Like, you know, this applies to him. Maybe he's trying to reach transcendence or something, but.
Considering Freddy is busy fighting him, and considering Jason goes in and is cast as a next door neighbor of Freddy Krueger, you know, this has been one of the only, I think, 2 or 3 horror movies where you've got Kane Hodder and Robert Englund in the same film, although they never meet. You know, I think you have to say that it's kind of all. I would say it's all natural because Eugene's saying, you know, it's a change that they come back time after time to make themselves into legends, and that was a change in philosophy. So I would say it's, you know, it's nothing to do with them just, you know, reincarnating or whatever. It's something they decide to do. And actually, at the beginning in the introduction, Taylor says that Towns of Elm Street are so scared that some say just falling asleep can kill you. So it's a myth there that falling asleep can kill you. So he's not going into their dreams.
It did upset me twice. It did upset me a little bit when Scott Wilson talks about his mates Mike, Fred, and Jay. No respect for them.
No respect for the dead.
Well, you don't hang out with Jason. Like, he doesn't talk. Even, you know, if you're taking away the supernatural Jason, like, what was the, you know, actual disabled, like, as far as I'm aware, Jason wasn't super vocal when he was a real person? I don't know. He's not your friend.
I think the idea is that a lot of these guys are kind of set dressing themselves and kind of taking on the role of somebody. So if it's not actually Jason, it's somebody kind of that has come to portray the role. Because as you find out, spoilers, Leslie Vernon isn't actually Leslie Vernon. He's somebody else that has decided to use this in order to kind of almost kind of psychopathically nobly kind of embody darkness in order to give kind of the lighter counterbalance. So I think there might be an idea that kind of, you know, it's essentially almost Jason is kind of an idea, and that somebody comes to portray this idea in order to establish these myths and cultural heritage in order to provide a counterbalance to the light. Is what I would argue is the idea, which just in itself is an interesting idea for a slasher series. Anyway, it's almost Jigsaw-like.
I think that this movie shows the idea gives it power, but I think the film also leans too far into this is an actual like person, an entity, you know, who there are points this film posits where Michael Myers is like off getting coffee while he's on his, you know, murder spree, because it does. You know, maybe he's a bad example. Someone who kills over a longer period of time. And that is true in like Scream, but they're not supernatural killers. And
no.
You know, trying to think about a supernatural figure going just about his day-to-day life, before then going and setting up elaborate ways to stalk and murder teenagers.
I think it's a lot of fun just to imagine that like Michael Myers or somebody playing Michael Myers sees this as a day job.
But
I think that's actually quite funny.
It is funny, but I don't think it like goes enough into that premise, because it then also goes into the actual horror movie part where we get out of the documentary.
I want to see like a short film, like spin-off of Scott Wilson's character hanging out with the others. You know, he invites around for a
like
barbecue,
Avengers style, you know.
Yeah, they're like for a cookout, you know, swapping stories, you know, just.
Now, the interesting one is that Leslie kind of says, you know, you wanted to know how people like Freddy and Chucky do these things. Like, just the doll is like working out in the meantime. Like,
but I think in this world, it's like just Brad Dourif, you know, the killer, you know, and just see he's not become the doll, he's just the killer, maybe.
Either that, or he kind of leaves like the doll as almost like a death card kind of thing, so it looks like it, you know. That's great. I just think like the idea of, I mean, even if you see that they are supernatural, the fact that Leslie Vernon is not is great for somebody that's having to work at it.
Until the very end.
For me, that's an idea that fits for like whatever that Taika Waititi short with like was it Thor and Korg as roommates or something?
Team Thor.
Yeah,
three of, I think. Yeah.
Like it's an idea that works for me in like sketch comedy length. It's not something that I really think is a great idea for feature. Or even full short film, you know, like.
I think your mileage on this kind of thing can vary, really. I mean, I get what you're saying. For me, it was about writing. I was perfectly happy with watching a full film of this stuff, but I get why, you know, if you can be tolerant for some of these kind of jokes and kind of genre commentary is limited, then you might get a bit twitchy after a while.
And admittedly, I have known some people have gone, it's not for me. And then I've gone, other people have gone, absolutely adore it. And I'm one of the people that absolutely adores this movie. And I love kind of that midway through, we come out of that and we go, okay, now we're switching to kind of the more traditional horror style. We put the cameras away when it gets into the more serious side. And the plot continues to go, because it's like, well, what do you do from here? And then it's like, well, he switches everything up, you know, and changes it up. But I just really think it's just like interesting and just fun. There is this is my style, because it's like, yes, there are horrific sides. There's a little bit of blood. There's a heart that gets cut out with a big pair of like garden sort of claws or whatever and placed in his hand. That's quite fun. But it's kind of on the goofier side, just about. While still keeping an air of cleverness to its plot and its twisting and the way it goes, you know. Yeah. And I just quote it endlessly without realizing. That's my trouble. Also, there's just like some weird things like behind the scenes that apparently there's some shots of some cleavage in this film, and it's quite funny because Taylor's like, Nathan, like. It's like, Leslie, really? Do we need that in the imagination? It's like, look, it's convention. We have to do it. Which obviously Cabin in the Woods will do later. That was a fake pair of breasts. And apparently everyone wanted to come to set today when they wanted to see it. Because I want to see the fake. What the hell? Just for a laugh.
I mean, there's a nice gag with like the supposedly virginal kind of final girl character, isn't there? You know, kind of how that's like a red herring, but just how that's completely thrown off was I found quite funny.
The second half works a lot better for me, for sure. Even with like, you know, that's where the self-awareness becomes funny for me, where we got to save all these people. Oh, I'm in trouble just because I had sex. Oh, like
just because I'm sexually active.
that stuff. It did make me laugh. I enjoyed the switch up more than the first 30 minutes or something, maybe more. Yeah. But
would you have liked the same material if it wasn't shot from like a found footage style?
Yeah, maybe if it was more the edited together documentary, there wasn't so much behind the scenes. You know, it was like it was presented as, you know, sort of a Netflix documentary or HBO documentary style. Yeah.
Yeah. rather than the footage of them putting it together, sort of thing. I think along with that, you also have to remember that sort of found footage and these kinds of films aren't really a thing. That's the next couple of years. So
They've kind of
Ghost.
been a thing, like in the early 2000s. They're hot.
You've had Ghost Watch in 92, 91, 92. You had Blair Witch, and then I think you had Noroi the Curse in like 2005.
Yeah,
That's really it. The next year is when it kicks off.
Yeah, you got like Mungo and Paranormal Activity like kind of on the horizon, haven't you? But it's not like the new hotness yet, is it? Still,
I'd argue it is in media, and you know the Blair Witch phenomenon was pretty big back then, in terms of like found footage and cinema verite.
Yeah, but it was kind of its own isolated thing. You might have had maybe one or two little things that came after, but the fact that I can't think of any, kind of, in the nicest way, I'm kind of immersed in horror, kind of semi-professionally. Kind of, I think, to the point that if I can't think of many, probably most people can't think of any, so it's not on the public. Maybe it was 25 years ago, but I can't think of anything. Yeah, Noroi the Curse was Noroi the Curse was a Japanese film, really, when it's the fact that most people haven't heard of it, even Japanese kind of cinema watchers, explains the fact that it's not translated. And then it's only in 2007 that you get the big three of Cloverfield, Wreck, and Paranormal Activity. Like Mungo comes the year in 2008 or gets released in 2008, and it's really from those kind of things that you get the launch. You know, Quarantine comes, Paranormal Activity 2, and you get Afflicted and all these things that come out in the next sort of 10 years or so. So it's just on that horizon.
On the cutting edge.
Footage. Yeah. Obviously, Grave Encounters 2012, I think it is. You know, so all that stuff is to come. So it's not quite there yet.
What do y'all think of his look, his mask, and his little scythe thing?
I think it's
the overalls.
Yeah, it's the kind of slasher that like someone would come up with if they were trying to start a new franchise. You know, it's different enough, but recognizably the same as like a Michael Myers or a Jason.
Yeah, and again, it has to. I mean, the hand side has to fit in with the legend, because they made Leslie Vernon till the fields of the hand side.
Yeah, he's invented his own origin story, and obviously he's got all these kind of paraphernalia to go with that to support the kind of backstory, hasn't he?
Did he invent it, or does it exist in the town before he shows up?
I think it already exists in the town, and he's kind of modified a few things in order to bring Kelly into it, so that he's got an excuse to use the legend for his own killing spree. So it's kind of slightly adjusting the legend that's already there for your own ends and needs. I think also I'm thinking to stuff like thinking about the look, bearing in mind this is probably the first major killing spree that he's done, because he's still asking Eugene for advice on stuff like, oh, I'm thinking of taking somebody out from the library, like a friend. Eugene's like, oof, I think that turns the heat up a little bit too much. Do you know anybody else around there? Maybe the librarian. Yeah, that's an idea, So he knows the tricks in the trade, and he's well prepared, but this is his first thing, and it seems to be very much just him doing this. He's on the run from Doc Halloran as well. And so I'm thinking of stuff like, again, the first suits that Deadpool makes in Deadpool, or the first suits that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man makes in the first one. They're not the finished article. They're very quick. They're very kind of thing. And even, let's be honest, Michael Myers in
first movie, Jason.
First movie, Jason. Burl up sack over the face.
Who is his mom, actually? But
yeah, but the first movie he's in is a burl up sack. So even it's like an oddly designed mask, but it's just right enough that it works. I think it's an oddly distorted face rather than anything specific. But I think the whole thing is really brought to life by Nathan Basil's acting, which, I mean, Jacob, you're there going, it's the film doesn't work, but Nathan Basil as Leslie Vernon is so good.
Because he is so charismatic, and you can kind of, he's planning awful stuff, and they're kind of terrified by what he's capable of. They're also beguiled by him, aren't they? And kind of, you'd really be sold by this guy and telling you like the ins and outs of the trades, and so to speak. And
he definitely rose above theater kids making a movie. I did like his performance.
Oh, it's so good. The fact he hasn't done anything else is a shame.
I think that my issue with all of it is it's very small. It's not an intimidating hand scythe. It's like the mask is missing the chin. It looks like, and then like he's just not an intimidating figure. Which it is what it is.
I think the way he gets around that though is the fact that he's thought it all through. And that's the scary part, because again, there's not that much. Realistically, there's not that much gore in this movie. It's not that graphic. Again, you've got the bit with the heart, and you've got a couple of bloodstains on people that get killed. But aside from that, it's fairly bloodless. And again, he's not big and hulking like Michael or Jason that just run after you and just stomp. There is a planning to it. It is we have these conventions to meet. We have to do this in order. This is how I'm going to make sure I do it in order, and I think in a way he is kind of somebody that kind of one of the weedier kids that looks up to the big guys. And so you've got to play to your strengths. And his strength is, I have all this preparation. I can think it all through. And they keep saying all the same time, that's absolutely genius. This is psychopathic, but it's so clever. And the fact that when they get into it, Leslie is able to switch things up and has already planned to switch things up in kind of the event and anything like that. Yes, it plays with the genre conventions, but that's where he is frightening. He will kill you because he already knows he's going to kill you before he gets there, rather than somebody like Jason that there's no way of stopping him.
I'll give you two diegetic points on that. The first is, if you're in a scenario where there's a killer, it doesn't matter if he looks intimidating, you're going to be scared. But at the same time, diegetically, as one of these teenagers, you don't understand his level of planning that he's gone to. And at first, I might be like, skinny farm guy in a creepy, I don't know. And what I want to see is the meta horror film about people who all already know the meta horror conventions and don't need to explain them to each other, and laugh at the guy trying to be a killer.
Yeah. The nearest I'll get to you on that is Grady Hendrix did a book a couple of years ago called The Final Girl Support Club, Final Girl Support Group, where it is vaguely thinly disguised survivors of Halloween and Friday the 13th and all this lot, and they've got a support group, and somebody starts picking them off one by one. And they eventually end up as a big fight at a summer camp, obviously.
What, was the killer at the support group, Kieran? Is that the twist?
I'm not going to give away the twist. I'm not going to give anything away. But it may not be. Who knows? But yeah, so that's the nearest you get.
Yeah. I did guess the other twist in this towards the end. That the reason why Taylor's kind of been targeted, basically. I kind of saw that coming.
But it's a really nice one, because at the same time you go, it's the only way it could logically.
You have to have like an extra thing to. You have to have an extra thing to unveil in the final act. But even so,
yes.
But it doesn't bother me. Spotting twists in horror films a mile off, because I think it's almost part of the fun, really. It's like, it's part of the grammar, and right, there's only so many options here, so it's either this or this, and I'm happy with any of these through.
As opposed to, I was watching when I watched the first time, because it just been released, somehow I caught it, Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, and when they were going down, it was like, somebody will betray you, and I went, okay, there are only like 2 or 3 possible options, all of them I will be disappointed with, because it'll be an awful ending. Like that's the alternative one. It's either there is no betrayal, it's those person, or it's the obvious one. It's like all of them I don't like. I love the setup of this movie. I love kind of and again, I saw this fairly early on in my kind of horror kind of watching stuff as well. So I'd seen enough that I got the jokes. But there's just the stuff with him like doing his cardio to begin with, and just all the preparation, and just like him just like being a guy and like, setting up the brick with the fishing line to yank it out of the way, to close the door. It now just means every time I watch films, I just like the slash movies, I just like think, we've cut the tree branches down ahead of time, and we've sabotaged all the weapons, and every time they go to like, I think it's Scream 3, I think it is, like they go in, the torch dies, and I'm like, it's because the Ghostface has taken all the batteries out beforehand, and stuff like that. It's just like, a great kind of alternative sort of idea of like, what would you do if you were human and had to do this, you know? And there's just random stuff like, you know, isn't this unfair? And he's like, I'm at a severe logistical disadvantage here. Like, it's not fair. There's one guy, there's 10 of them. I've got to keep them all in check somehow, you know? It's just really fun to sit from that angle.
I'm now realizing that I would like the demon or ghost version of this movie better over the killer because that's more absurd to be following around a demon who's like, you know, in a little girl, hello, you know, or we see his disembodied form. Again, this may just be sketch or short film length, but that would be more up my alley than skinny guy putting on overalls.
The Last Exorcism? Where it's the priest that then goes and kind of fakes a load of stuff. So he puts like smoke canisters in like a crucifix to hold against somebody's head, but then like an actual kind of demonic possession happens, obviously.
I don't want it, you know, I don't want it to be naturalistic like this. I want the demon to be like, yeah, people are just terrified of pots and pans falling and doors closing and sheets flying off of them.
I don't have to do much work, really, you know.
It was a lot harder in the days where people slept on straw.
Yeah, I mean, there was Deadstream a few years ago, which is like a live stream kind of YouTube kind of movie, but it's like ghost hunters go to supposedly haunted house and find out, yeah, it is. It's disprove it, and it turns out it is haunted. But the ghost in that is very self-aware and modern enough to know about the technology and kind of you know, take advantage of that. So. Setting up our own jump scares.
Oh, or human hunters that they're ghosts that go around with FME devices.
Yeah. I think Clive Barker did a story in one of the books of blood. Is it The Yattering in Jack? I think it is, where kind of a demon is tasked to essentially haunt a guy almost. And he just keeps on going, trying to get this guy to kind of acknowledge him and then fall to the dark side. And he won't do it. And this guy's, and is it the Canterville Ghost? I think it is Oscar Wilde. That is something similar, where this ghost is like, oh, it's now night again. I've got to go and rattle some chains to like scare somebody. So I think people have done something similar. I mean, this movie might not be for everyone, but I adore this movie so much. Like, it's one of my kind of.
I really enjoyed experiencing it for the first time. I think it was a lot of fun. So
yeah,
I know 2 out of 3 of us on the recommended side.
I hate fun and am cynical, so take my stuff with a grain of salt.
I'm the cynical guy. I mean, I can see why it doesn't work for some people. And again, I'm not a found footage guy. And I think if it was the found footage stuff all the way through, it wouldn't have worked for me. But it's the fact that it switches it up several times into the kind of more traditional thing that I've kind of allows it to work for me. Also, I was watching it through again last night because I hadn't seen it all the way through many years, and it's interesting kind of that Leslie kind of tries to. I'm almost now on the fence of, is he doing this because he's a pure psychopath, or is he doing it because he has decided to essentially take the hit? He obviously enjoys it to some extent, but he's like he stands there and gives a speech of kind of, we have to do this because of, you know, so that people can have like barbecues and stuff like that, and everything that we hold dear and is good in this world. So he obviously acknowledges that he does like the more normal stuff, but he's like taking the hit to be the bad guy so that you can have them. And I actually think if you'd have gone a little bit more into that, again, this is a 90-minute movie. It's, I think, a directorial debut. It's not got that much money in it, you know, hence half of it is shot in handheld. It made about 70,000 at the box office.
They're also always in like the most ruined, decrepit houses you've ever seen. Like these teens are hanging out in a place and like the walls are just destroyed.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, welcome to slasher movies. It's I think he'd gone into a little bit into Leslie's kind of philosophy of stuff. That might have been very much. I mean, they do touch on it as much as they can get away with, and they've obviously gone, we've got 90 minutes, there's only so much we can do. So that might have been are more interesting. Maybe that's where kind of the sequel or prequel that was going to have, because they were going to have a prequel being before The Mask, the something of Leslie Vernon, and then I think the sequel is going to be Return of the Mask or something like that. Beyond
Son
the
of the
Mask. That was
Mask.
it. It's Beyond the Mask. The Return of Leslie Vernon was going to be the sequel. As far as I know, up until this point, it's not being done, which is a shame. Something along the lines of I don't want to do it just yet because this is from like ages and ages ago, because I know the quote from ages ago. Something along with I think I'm not sure where it comes from. 20 Truck Action, so at least 2016 is the latest one. So it's earlier than that. And Nathan's kind of going, it'd have to be the greatest script, and he said something along the lines of, I don't think Leslie would take anything less. It's got to be the greatest thing ever in order for like Leslie Vernon as a character to go, yes, I want to do this film. But it's one of those one-offs that for me is just exactly. In fact, 2017 there was a script, Glossaman Exchange. The script from the sequel began a little dated due to changes in horror, because that's the thing as well. It's at a very certain point in horror. It's 10 years after Scream, pretty much. It's at that point where everyone's starting to say, here's the change up, and now everything changes. A bit like Scream has to reinvent itself. But yeah, Leslie Vernon, that's one of my personal faves.
Yeah.
And don't worry, Jacob, we put up with Stay Alive last week for you. So you can put up with Leslie Vernon for me.
I mean, it wasn't putting up with it. I was just watching and experiencing it and having thoughts on it as I did.
You're not going to think about slasher movies the same way that big slasher sprees, though. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, so from that, rough down under.
To pure kind of exploitation, grindhouse 70s.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah. So one of my favorite horror films. This is like top 5 horror for me. It's also kind of weirdly kind of like a comfort movie for me. Just if I just want to put on a horror, just switch off for a bit, just get swept up in it.
If Sam's sad, this is what he turns on.
Yeah, it is. It's because it's really dark and twisted, but it's funny as well.
And people call me the psychopath.
Yeah. So this is The Loved Ones from 2009. Australian horror film from Sean Byrne, who also did Dangerous Animals this year, which I'd highly recommend as well. His serial killer shark movie. in that the shark isn't the serial killer, but a serial killer uses sharks to commit his kills. So I first saw this at uni. We were doing a module on like horror from around the world, basically, and this was the representative for Australia. I mean, Australia obviously has a long old storied history of really memorable horror films, but it's probably one of the more memorable recent ones. Basically, how I tend to describe it, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets Misery, but in the Australian outback. I mean, Sean Byrne, well, the director Sean Byrne described it in an interview as, he said, imagine if we merged Carrie and Evil Dead somehow, all the rituals of the prom, but in one location.
I think a little bit of, is it Tourist Trap? Is it Tourist Trap? It's Tourist Trap where they kind of bury them under the ground like that, cut out the tongues and feed them like plants, isn't it? I think. Is that Tourist Trap?
Possibly.
I think so. I'm going to have to look it up.
At first, I thought you meant this movie was a tourist trap, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to Australia based on this movie.
Yeah. So it's basically it's really kind of gnarly and kind of shocking, but also it's got like a twisted sense of humor to it. And
sorry, no, Motel Hell.
All right, okay. And it keeps kind of throwing kind of unexpected curveballs at you throughout. So it's basically the story is Brent. He's a high schooler, depressed high schooler. He's a year after his dad's died in a car crash. He makes a mistake of rejecting Lola's invite to the school prom, and even then she kidnaps him, or her dad kidnaps him, and they imprison him and torture him for nights to give her basically the prom night of her dreams. And it turns out they've done it before to lots of other boys. They've got form in that regard. And meanwhile, Brent's mum and girlfriend are looking for him, trying to work out at what point he disappears and where he could have been taken. So, yeah. And basically, a lot of it kind of revolves around this really the most effed up kind of family dynamic you can imagine. I mean,
Yes.
Lola, who's just known as Princess most of the film, and her dad. There's a sort of quasi kind of incestuous kind of relationship with them.
Would we say quasi?
Okay, so it's an incestuous relationship. I mean, they're conveniently cut off before they actually kiss, but I feel this isn't the first time they've had like an interaction like that. I mean, it's a horrible scene early on where he arrives home. He's done her bidding. He's kidnapped her ideal boy. Got some fried chicken on the way home, and picked up her prom dress, and he brings it into her, and please down to, and he's about to leave the room, and she says, "Oh no, stay! I want to see you try it on." And then the camera kind of gets like a POV shot of like what he's looking at, and he's taking his daughter in her underwear. Basically, it's really icky.
It's what Sam watches when he gets sad.
I'm trying to say, this just sounds comfort movie.
Also around like the family dinner table, you've got her mum, who's been lobotomized, and this is again something they end up doing to all of her boyfriends. They drill holes in boys' heads and pour boiling water into their skulls.
It's the Dahmer process.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's apparently I was inspired by Dahmer, although apparently none of his victims he put that through actually survived the process. Whereas all of Lola and Daddy's victims, they get turned into like these subhuman kind of golem-looking things that they keep in their basements and feed.
I was thinking, strangely enough, from that, I was thinking Audition.
Yeah, it's a bit of that, yeah. Apparently, the idea of because when I first saw it, I didn't really know exactly what they were doing beyond causing him unimaginable pain, but the whole injecting bleach into his neck apparently it paralyzed the vocal cords as well, so he can't scream. So I think you're leading guy after the I think it's like the 25-minute mark, and this doesn't have any further dialogue because his character is actually rendered mute from that point onwards. Apparently, that was something that another killer, Robert Bardella, used to do to his victims. Stop from screaming out and can't help. Apparently, so Brad is played by Xavier Samuel, who's a fairly big actor now. He's been in a few Hollywood films by this point. And Robin McLeavy is a princess, and I think she's basically retired from acting now. I think she was in a few things after this. She played Mary Todd Lincoln in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, I seem to remember, but not much.
I still somehow haven't put myself through that.
Yeah, but she's like the main reason to see this. I think just Princess is just such a memorable, like deranged horror villain, and her and like and Daddy, as like her brute force, basically, just like a kind of blood instrument, to carry out her twisted thrills. But apparently, they originally so Daddy is played by it's cast again.
John Brumpton.
Yeah, Daddy's played by John Brumpton, but apparently they originally offered the role to the guy from Wolf Creek, who turned it down because he at that point he got tired of playing psychopaths in a horror films, basically. So he thought they'll all be too similar. And I quite like that John Brumpton's kind of taken it, because he's again, I watched an interview with him and he basically says he'd probably be a killer anyway, but he's like, because he's doing it for his daughter's pleasure, it's also it's so much worse, him being an extension of her kind of fetish, I suppose, for like cruelty and everything like that. And obviously in the process, he's lobotomized his own wife, because she presumably clashed with her daughter, and they just sit around and call her Bright Eyes, because she's just like, just completely just staring off into distance, basically. She's obviously survived the lobotomization process. But it's always kind of sweet because I love anything with like a kind of depraved, kind of dysfunctional family dynamic, which I always find quite funny, like genre films. The scene where the dinner table scene where kind of, so they've taken the pictures, they've tied Brent to a chair, and they're trying to take pictures. So Mo was sitting in his lap, and then they say, "Oh, get one with Bright Eyes as well." So they bring the mum over, and she's sat on as well, and they're all thinking like a film picture. Right, shortly after that, Mo was kind of obviously trying to get a reaction, and she says to Dad, she says, "Who's prettier, me or Bright Eyes?" And even at that point, even though he's obviously done horrible things to his own wife, and done other horrible things on behalf of his daughter, he's still reluctant to take a side. And he goes, "Oh, you're both pretty."
Yeah,
it's kind of funny. The repeated line they say to Brent, when he's like crying out in pain and stuff, they just keep shouting back at him, "We can't hear you," which reminds me a lot of, again, Texas Chainsaw. Just the famous dinner table scene that with Sally screaming her lungs out, and the family just kind of literally cackling back at her face. I mean, that's like a good 10-15 minutes of just screaming and
let's be honest, the last half an hour of Texas Chainsaw is just her screaming.
Yeah, that's true.
Kieran,
to a certain extent.
Kieran, does the "We Can't Hear You" remind you of the abridged series with oh God, what did they say? "We're tormenting you."
Torment. Yes, so obviously the loved ones nicked everything from Yu-Gi-Oh! The abridged series on YouTube. Definitely, that's how it works.
Yeah. I really like the sound design this as well, like the soundtrack. Obviously, you have like a score and then like choice kind of placement of like songs, like the repeaters. "I'm Not Pretty Enough," kind of sweet princess kind of song. It becomes like Lola's kind of theme, which obviously puts you on edge. But also like sounds like in general, there's also like a low rumble on the soundtrack. It's constantly like putting you on edge, basically. Kind of adding that extra skin crawling kind of element to it, which I think is quite a neat idea.
Yeah.
I mean, so this was Sean Burnham's kind of featured directorial debut. Done a few shots for this, I think, which I think one of them included Robin McLeavy, I think. But it wasn't like a massive budget or anything. I mean, it got support from Melbourne. The Melbourne International Film Festival Fund and Film Victoria, Screen Australia, so all of these, kind of arts kind of supporting kind of companies in Australia. Yeah, but it cost 4 million Australian dollars and only made back 358,000. But it kind of had it did all right at the film festivals, and then had a bit of another life on home media. I think it's done quite well on DVD and Blu-ray over the years. Weirdly, there's never been a Blu-ray release in the States. Apparently, they've even though it was, I think it's released through. Was it Altitude in the States? So it's a fairly big kind of company.
Yeah.
But they've only ever done DVDs out there. I think it gets a Blu-ray release in the UK and in Australia, but nowhere else.
I'm just looking at Wiki, and it reckons that it was distributed by Paramount internationally.
Oh,
so
all right, okay, yeah.
So definitely no excuse.
Sorry.
Now Paramount Skydance.
I do like this movie, but I have two major questions. The first is what is the point of the B plot with the best friend at prom or the dance or whatever? That doesn't play into anything as far as I could tell. Did I miss something?
I think because it's a prom movie, you had to have some characters at the prom while the horrible things were going on. Because it's like two separate prom kind of situations, wasn't there? It's like the prom of their dreams, or even though they just get stoned and have sex in the car, and or the prom of nightmare.
That is the prom of my dreams.
Yeah. But yeah, I can get what you're saying. I think you meant.
Yeah, I would have said that the idea is essentially purely almost for that juxtaposition.
Like,
Yeah.
And I think it also helps give a little bit of relief as well from just the straight.
It would be like too intense if it was like an hour and a half in Loa's house, wouldn't it?
I thought that the other prom date was going to end up being like a killer or like a succubus, like something like that. My second one is, I said in our group chat, is the point of the movie just that he dies, which is a reason for him to carry around the dad at the beginning? Is that the only point of that, is for him to carry around a razor blade, which he uses to cut himself? Kieran asked if I had seen the end, and I have. And I still don't get it.
It's to recreate exactly the same thing happening right at the end. Of some appearing in the
because the opening scene is the one that got away, the one of those victims who escapes, and so she directly causes his dad's death, which eventually brings him to her. So it's tying it all together. It's again like a lot of things. If you probably apply too much logic, and will this really happen to any of this? It all falls apart, doesn't it? But
that does make sense.
Yeah. But
we're applying the logic to this, and then we're about to talk about Possessor in a minute. Like,
I do. Like I say, I do really enjoy this. I think just in general, Australian horror films tend to kind of scratch my itch, kind of horror-wise. It's kind of a combination of like harsh, unforgiving landscapes and usually like a really dark sense of humor with some horrific imagery. It's a good combo for me, horror-wise.
And it's funny as well, because again, I'm going to say this about kind of Australian horror movies in the same way I say things about like Japanese and Korean stuff. Normally, we only see the good ones. Probably also because they, just the Australian film industry isn't as large, so it doesn't get as much. And quite often, when it is, it's sort of directors that have come from Australia, gone to the US, and come back, so the big films come with them because they can get some kind of grant and stuff like that. But they're not afraid to go nasty. This will Wolf Creek, and yes, you get some US films that do that as well. But in a kind of fairly raw, brutal, nasty kind of way. Rather, I want to use the phrase like gnarly, rather than kind of just
I think we're saying in our group chat, like the difference between this and Wolf Creek is there's a bit of relief to this. There's like another element to it. There is like that kind of dark comic, kind of almost absurdist kind of elements, kind of, and like the moments of relief at the actual prom. Whereas Wolf Creek's just relentless, and you just feel awful for days after watching.
I've seen Wolf Creek once. And I'm sure at some point I will have to watch the sequels to say I've watched it. But I think I saw Wolf Creek over 10 years ago, and I'm in no rush to watch it again. Like
from what I remember, Wolf Creek 2 is better because it does get a bit of that absurdist kind of humor going. And was it Mick the villain in that?
I think so. Yeah.
He gets put through the ringer more and gets a bit of just desserts, which is fun to see as well. There's so catharsis in this, isn't it? That Brent eventually gets his own back, and big time. He's summoned inner strength from somewhere, and really goes to town on Daddy.
I think just the 2000s in general, there was a very sort of. Yes, you get this from kind of the splatter films as well. There was a extremely kind of just nihilistic bent to a lot of horror films where it was just incredibly bleak. I'm thinking even something like we covered right at the beginning of Second Cut History. I'm not sure if you were with this, Sam, yet, but we did Haute Tension. If you remember that
was before I joined.
That's incredibly nice. I'm thinking, a lot of the remakes of stuff, even sort of like the remake of Black Christmas is incredibly bleak. The remake of Hills Have Eyes incredibly bleak. The first one was bleak as well, but there's a little bit of light to that because Wes Craven is the 70s, and there's a bit like that. Certain decades of Last House on the Left, and So, and then you got all your torture with the Hostel and your Saws and your Martyrs and your Severances and stuff like that, even like remakes of the Hitches. There's certain periods of time where a lot of the big films, I mean, compared to something like the 2010s, like the 2000s, a lot of them are incredibly just grimy and bleak and just the remakes Texas Chainsaw. Again, maybe that's because a lot of them are remakes and therefore they're trying to one up the originals, which are seen as perhaps light, so they have to go in a bit harder and nastier. But they're just so dark and grimy. Wolf Creek is one of them where they just like suck all the joy out of it for something which is just like you feel icky after watching. This has a lot of that, but then like right at the end, there's a good 5 minutes where there's some like absurdly kind of stupid things, like there's a car just there and you just see her just crawling along the ground really slowly.
She's dragging herself along with her knife, her killing knife.
Yeah.
While her wrist is spiked, it snaps, And,
and even the kind of fight in the Volkswagen Beetle between the two female characters in this. There's no music, and it just the sound of them going. It's funny. Like you know that she's done these horrific things and like that, but it's actually hilarious because it's just slightly pathetic.
Kieran, I think part of that you're talking about where things got bleaker, part of it's like just the industrial realities where you could do realistic looking gore for cheaper in the 2000s. There is the element of like one-upping all the stuff that came before, and then kind of similar to when censorship restrictions first let up in the 60s and 70s, you get all those more violent films, and then then the 80s one up that, then the 90s one up that, the 2000, it's just the ever.
With the 2000s, critics will say, and they do say this, I've seen one or two people that it's in the title. Obviously, this is for the most part of that decade, it's a post 9/11 world, and so there are critics that have written about, and I don't think I think one of these books that I saw and I started reading a little bit of it, looking for something in particular back in the day. So I don't know the theories, but I know there are people writing about it. Essentially, kind of there is a shift in films post 9/11, and so maybe there's a bleakness to things that have shifted into a world that is a lot less, perhaps innocent than what we thought.
You can usually type back things of that era back to 9/11, can't you? And how we kind of the world had changed and everything's a lot more cynical and cautious about perceived threats and everything.
Maybe this is a metaphor for like the Islamic State and drilling into someone's head and brainwashing them to become
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, the drill is definitely not inspired by Driller Killer from 1979.
No.
The whole thing is definitely not a mix of like just 70s exploitation schlock and like, what if we did this now? I'm not going to say this is a comfort movie. This is the first time I watch it, and it won't be. But I can. It's not going to. It doesn't 100% click for me, but I can appreciate it because it's just not. It's let's just run with it and just go all out and see what happens.
I will say the aesthetic had me worried at first. I like the grindhouse direction it took because I don't know. It was reminiscent at first of like Juno, late 2000s just style.
Yeah, but I think it's very consciously that set those expectations, with like the upcoming prom and everything. Weirdly, apparently, they made it a prom kind of film just because Sean Byrne kind of likes those kind of films. Because apparently, the prom isn't really an Australian thing. It's like
I was wondering
like a formal dance at the end of term, but they made it more like an American prom and like the thing like crown the prom queen and everything like that. Just to have those kind of conventions in it, even though they're not really part of Australian culture.
They can't dance down under; they'll fall off the globe.
Yeah.
I will also say, obviously, the prom night remake that came out the year before that I'm just seeing. Idris Elba was in it, and I didn't know because I haven't seen it because I'm booked after it. It's the fifth film. Oh God, no! Prom movies.
I also noticed that like Australian kind of censorship is famously quite severe. Particularly in terms of like kind of violent horror films and video games. And literally they were going to slap this with like the highest certificate, but then on appeal they turned it down because they realised, well, it's literally still the tone of it. It's like the absurd humour and everything like that. Things were just so extreme they weren't realistic anymore. They're almost funny, so they actually downgraded it like the next certificate down. So like, take it down from like the equivalent of like an 18 to equivalent of 15. I think it's still an 18 over here. I think it was still edited in the States for release. Yeah, to cut out a few more graphic shots.
No,
I mean, if you can have like someone, stabbing right through your foot onto the floor, you might as well go for it and have them literally hammering a knife into your foot.
Yeah.
Into the floor.
I mean, I'm still reminded again the old story about Scream and Wes Craven trying to get the censorship to bring it down from an X rating to an R and just not doing it and doing all these cuts, which is why the intro, the zoom on Casey, on Drew Barrymore's body in the trees is done the way it is because they took out every other frame to try and kind of have it on screen. Let's speed it up. And one of the Weinsteins apparently went, give the phone to me after like 5 cuts, I'll get it doing. Phoned up an hour later, got the rating. Wes Craven's like, how the hell did you do that? And he went, I told him it was a comedy. It's like, look, all it is sometimes is context,
yeah, exactly.
And I think it was Hitchcock as well that was trying to get past the censors. So what he did is he'd add, it's got other people. I can't remember who it was. For some reason, Hitchcock's in my head, where they'd add stuff in that they knew the censors would pick up on that he didn't want, so he could take them out, so the film he actually wanted would pass. So you get funny stories like that.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting film, and definitely a good one, even if it's not my cup of tea. I appreciate that it is a good film.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I watched it. So
if you're ever just in a real dark place, you watch this movie and it'll bring you joy and warmth.
Yeah, you do realize, Sam, that now, like every time somebody mentions comfort movies, this is going to come up.
I'm going to stereotype Sam as like, yeah, he loves to just curl up with a cocoa and a blanket and watch Sallow.
Human Centipede final sequence, Tusk.
Let's move on to something more. Let's move on to something more cerebral, please.
Before we,
I was going to say, definitely not more cheering.
But before we fully transition, Sung mentions that I'm assuming she, goddess of sass, watched.
Oh, hi, Sung. How you doing, Susan? That's my boss.
Oh, nice.
For publishing. So how you doing, Susan? Sorry, how you doing, chap?
This is what Kieran does in his spare time.
Yeah, this is who I edit novels for.
Nice. Okay. So Sung says Ouija Shark was a movie she had a good time with, and
Ouija Shark.
Yes.
Oh, I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Sung says hi.
The list. How you doing, Susan? Yeah, Ouija Shark. I'm surprised this wasn't a Roger Corman movie.
Yeah, that's what the poster looks like. Man, I'm sure it's an amazing CGI shark in that film.
Well, Corman did do Dino Shark and Sharktopus, so yeah.
I confused it with Shark Exorcist, which is a different.
Which is different movie. Again, yeah. It's a bit like I've yet to see Velocipaster. I'll get around to it at some point.
Is it Martha who's the big shark person from TFM? Nice. Yeah, but Martha's the person you want to hit up. She'll know all about Ouija Shark.
Yeah, we'll get Martha on at some point into a Shark episode. Maybe for Shark Week next year. When is Shark Week next year?
I don't know.
I don't know. Introduce Possessor. Like I've got nothing else on Loved Ones whilst I look at when Shark Week is.
Well, these two guys like to watch low budget stuff. Well, I guess Sam found this through school, so he didn't find it. But I don't watch low budget horror films that are deep cuts. I just watch mainstream things from people that I've heard of or people who are adjacent to someone I've heard of.
I was going to say, this you only heard of because the name was Cronenberg, let's be fair.
Yes. I had not seen, what is it, Antivirus, whatever his first movie was.
Antiviral. yeah. I've seen it since, but it was on the back of Possessor
Well,
because I thought, oh, what else has he done?
that maybe should have been the movie I did, but I wanted to watch Possessor because I've thought about it a few times over the past 5 years. Yes, it's been 5 years since Possessor came out,
Wow.
and I've been meaning to watch it ever since. And the reason I will fight against it's not on people's underseen list as a good definition for best movies is because this movie was underseen because of COVID. So, really, you're only going to have watched Possessor if you have heard of David Cronenberg or like horror films or, or a cinephile, that kind of stuff. It definitely is not a general audience movie.
Yeah, either that or you're going back after hearing about Crimes of the Future, which I still haven't seen myself. But Crimes of the Future was that David or Brandon?
that was David. He did Infinity Pool. That was Brandon's follow-up, which I like a lot more than this one.
Yeah.
On second viewing.
Controversial.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Infinity Pool, so I can't say anything.
I've been meaning to rewatch Possessor, so I looked it up. I remembered it was a COVID movie. It made no money. And people did like it. Critics liked it, but I think this is a movie that maybe would have been bigger if we weren't locked inside for most of a year, unable to go. Well, I take that back. I was able to go watch movies at a certain point because America is the home of the freedom to get sick.
Yeah.
But,
a bit like antiviral.
Yes.
Anyway.
But Sam, I know you liked this a lot. Did you not? Was this on a list for you?
I did. Yeah. I think it was in my top 5 of that year. I seem to remember. I'm trying to find the list now.
Yeah, when TFM did their magazine last year before we closed, which I'm pretty sure you can still order and buy at least a PDF of, if not a physical copy. That I contributed a top 15 horror movies of the 2020s so far, so it was the first 5 years, and I went because I knew that Possessor probably had a chance of being on there and hadn't seen it, so I went and then I did put it on there. So I have seen it before. What did I say about it? My paragraph. If you want me to read it very quickly and give people a sneak peek of the genuine academic theory they can read by purchasing it. Canadian director David Cronenberg is a legend in the horror world. With the focus on body horror genre, he's crafted some of the most horrific and memorable films and ideas in cinema. As it turns out, his son Brandon Cronenberg can also make mind-bending horror movies. With a uniquely cyberpunk premise of an assassin working for an agency that takes over somebody's body in order to carry out murders, Cronenberg takes what could have been a conventional spy thriller with a tweak and turns it into something utterly bizarre. Experimental editing techniques add additional distortion to a collision of reality and trauma of not being able to ground oneself in the truth. With a main pair of powerhouse performances from Andrea
I didn't realize
Risberg,
this was going to be so long. I thought it was like a blurb.
and Christopher Abbott, it hosts blood and brains in satisfyingly equal measure through its intense, twisting narrative. Final thing. Dark, nihilistic, and thoroughly unhinged, Possessor is a film others will be using as an influence in years to come.
Yeah. So it looks like I put it at number 8 of my top 10 that year. So yeah, it was in the top 10.
There you go. It's underrated out of Sam's top 10 films. This should be higher. Yeah. I liked it a lot. I don't know if I did a top 5 or 10 or anything for that year, but I maybe only saw 10 movies. So COVID was weird.
Yeah.
But this one did stick with me, and not just because it is the son of Cronenberg. It's also the Cronenberg sequel. It's also just a really interesting movie visually. I mean, I agree with everything Kieran said about this movie in terms of its visual style, the way that it works. It is good, but what changed for me this second time around was the character stuff, where I realized this is a movie about a cold-hearted assassin who needs to, cut off ties to her human self. That's sort of a theme. That's part of the character. But the movie itself just feels so sterile and I don't feel any humanity from the characters to give that conflicting, nature for the main assassin lady who is embodying a guy for like half the movie or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I think I had similar things watching for me. So even though I put it in the list and acknowledge it's a very well done and good film, I mean, you know me anyway. Quite a lot of films I find quite hard to connect to emotionally anyway. And if they're very kind of, especially horror movies, if they take themselves too seriously, they can kind of find themselves eradicating any kind of, or in a kind of an attempt to kind of make themselves kind of, I don't know, appealing to, oh, we're not just a horror movie, we're something more. We take ourselves seriously. We have deep themes and stuff like that. You can sometimes eradicate a lot of feeling and emotion and kind of become cold. And again, this is one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of Ari Aster's first films. And it's on the borderline with that, I think, for me as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the coldness kind of the characters kind of ties back kind of thematically, it's kind of losing yourself through doing so many like unspeakably horrible acts. It's kind of, you're becoming less and less human each time you do it. And if you do it through kind of driving around someone else, to do the physical act itself, kind of identity dissociation, and like each time you come back, it's harder to kind of root yourself back into the real world and kind of who you used to be, because there's so little of you left at that point. So.
I guess part of the issue with that is we really only see two of the, and it's implied that she's done it for a long time. She's gone through all of these different things, but maybe a little bit more of that, and then there is the final, maybe we follow the other guy, and then eventually she has to possess him. I wonder if there would be a way to get that across just a little bit, like in terms of making me feel it, and the journey, and not just the effect, which kind of begins from the jump.
I mean, I think one of my things is that I mean, I'm not going to doubt this is an incredibly well put together film. It's incredibly stylish. It does what it needs to do. It's incredibly well put together. Me personally, I would have liked to see, and I've said this before with the horror films, especially the ones that are classified as elevated. Anyway, that I like to see more of a change in emotional point with the characters. With this character, when you start the film, she's already very far down in a kind of not feeling very good emotionally, so you don't have that far to fall. It's a bit contrived, but I mean, Kurt Vonnegut would say that in a man in hole structure, you start out with somebody having a good day because nobody wants a story about somebody that's depressed to start with, and then you put them through the ringer. If you've got somebody down there already just trying to get through, there's not that far to put them through the ringer through. So it already kind of disconnects me from it to begin with. Having said that, I understand that sometimes you have to pick up from this point. And maybe there were earlier drafts where there is another thing where she's actually okay, and then we lose the thing that we don't have a tragic backstory, and that's part of the thing. Maybe in a novelization, we would have that. And it's Canadian film. There's obviously going to be a little bit of money put in there through the Cronenberg name, but it's not the US film industry. This is not a $40 million movie where you can do whatever you want. Yes, it's lengthy, but a lot of the time it is kind of smaller, closed sets. Your only big name in there is Sean Bean, who really does his
Jennifer
job.
Jason Leigh.
Oh, Jennifer Jason Leigh, yeah. But you don't have the massive kind of, you can't do absolutely anything that you want.
Yeah. I think it helps a great deal that you've got two like really talented and interesting kind of actors in the leads. You've got Andrew Riseborough and Christopher Abbott, who, for my money, are kind of two of the most compelling kind of performers of their generation. And they're both very intense acts and they can say a lot with very little. They're both quite still performances, unless having their kind of freakouts, identity freakouts, basically. But they're just, I think they can do a lot with little, if that makes sense, and you kind of see there's more going on like that behind their eyes and conflict and everything. I don't think they need to express out loud because it's written on their faces,
Yeah.
part of their talent.
Going back to the Cronenberg name, Brandon Cronenberg is kind of low key, really. His Wikipedia article is not very long. He's only made 3 films. He had an 8-year gap between his first feature and his second feature. And really, I would say he is a clearly, when you're a Nepo baby in Hollywood, you get a lot of advantages in terms of like training, know-how, connections, and all that. But in terms of like the product put on screen here, I mean, he's clearly one of the Nepo babies who's like, oh, I mean, they are talented. Yeah, sure, maybe he is, leaning into his father's zone, but maybe that's just also what he's genuinely interested in, is making these weird horror films. I am surprised there's not a Skarsgård in this one. This seems like it should have had like Tilda Swinton and like Alexander Skarsgård or something. But Sam, I agree with what you said. I like the performers; they are good. I just wonder if maybe he could have used his cachet to get some bigger names in there, really try and push this into the general audience mainstream. Before people knew that there would be a giant pandemic.
No, you're talking about Nepo babies. The one that comes to mind that is actually doing good work, that just seems to have just decided to turn up and destroy everything on a tear, is Osgood Perkins.
Yeah.
Like he did The Black Coat's Daughter in 2015. Then he did I'm the pretty thing that lives in the house. Okay, that was 2016. Then a 4-year gap for Gretel and Hansel. But then, just out of nowhere, Longlegs, 2024, The Monkey and Keeper this year. Next year, he's got another one. It's just like, if we've got 3 movies going at a time, like, it just, in the nicest way, seems to have come out of nowhere. Like, I mean, relatively speaking. And now he's just like, oh, there's over 1 a year. It's not like 2 a year. So slow down. We're not used to the Nikkei.
I did not know that he was a Nepo baby until he recently talked about the Ed Gein stuff. And like the way that Norman Bates has brought it.
Anthony Perkins?
No, I had no idea. But then I read that article and I was like, oh my God, this is Norman Bates. So he's going to be dressing up like his dad.
Fun fact, he played young Norman Bates in Psycho 2.
I did see that on his wiki. And once I found that out. You get to be a hipster. You get to be a hipster filmmaker who makes a very nearly good horror film in Longlegs when you're a Nepo baby.
Longlegs is so good until the final act. I'm like, I'm out of it now.
Possessor is kind of like Leslie Vernon in the sense that it takes a naturalistic approach to what is generally a supernatural process. The act of possessing someone isn't something done by demons or ghosts in this film. It's something achieved through technology to go into somebody's body where you have agency, you are a human, you have your thoughts and your memories that you then stay connected to through objects and totems, very much like an actual ghost would.
The trouble is that as we've been talking about this the last sort of 20 minutes, the more we've been talking, the more I've gone, the trouble is, as much as it's a good film that I don't connect with, but I appreciate it's a good film people should go and see, there's a hell of a lot in this. I can actually use my PhD, so I may end up watching this again.
Yeah. Well,
slightly annoying.
I really didn't think about it the first time at all, but this time, we've been talking about ghost stuff, and Kieran just he loves haunted things, and so I'm just sitting there going, oh yeah, no, this is a ghost movie with a person.
Well, like in the novel as it's coming, I have characters that jump into people's kind of memories and stuff and alter memories and like can walk around in their bodies and kind of move around. So that's a thing, even if they're not possessing them. But the whole thing of possession, one of my arguments that I will be making that I made last year at a conference was that essentially controlling a video game character is an act of demonic possession.
Yes.
Because
especially when I'm in control.
Well, or my thing is that a video game Avatar comes from the Hindu. It's originally brought in Snow Crash in 1993. Also introduced the term metaverse, which is where Zuckerberg got it from. And it's also where, and so you go to a virtual reality kind of game thing, and you control something called an avatar. And it's the first time it's used for a kind of virtual reality world, which is now why all the video games are called avatars. It comes from Snow Crash. But my argument was because the term avatar implies it was originally Hindu for when a god walks among people. This was kind of the thing that they used. It was their representative. Whenever you play a video game, you are essentially taking the role of a kind of spiritual being, piloting something around. Therefore, in a way, you are becoming a kind of spirit, in a way, spiritual agent piloting something around. And there's not much difference. So I'm looking at this going, damn, there's quite a lot I can actually use in terms of possession. Because also there's weird things with the term possess, meaning to own. Therefore, you own something. Therefore, there's rights, and that all goes into why do people wear clothes? Why do ghosts wear clothes? In terms of owning and ownership and possession and weird linguistic stuff like that. But we won't go into that.
Do we count the sheet with like holes in the eyes as clothes?
I'm fairly sure the sheet with holes in the eyes comes from a very. I can't remember what it is, but I've got a feeling they can trace that as a kind of gimmick to like a particular story or something along those lines. And so, like, from there,
a convenience for we need to be able to see the entity. But whereas now, with horror films, you could just have an invisible spirit that slams stuff and.
Yeah. Or at the very least, kind of the trope of a ghost being a sheet, a white bed sheet coming over. But even before M.R. James literally has a haunted bed sheet as the climax of a Whistle I'll Come to You, My Lad. I'm fairly sure somewhere they have this is the earliest example we have of a haunted bed sheet being compared to like a ghost or that kind of thing. I just can't remember what it is. Well, yeah, Possessor. The more I think about it, the more I go, yeah, I can actually use this for my PhD.
Now, poor Sean Bean. The plot of the movie is she needs to murder Sean Bean. Yes. So she's going to possess his future son-in-law. He's like, I don't know, the CEO of a tech company or something. And so he's going to murder Sean Bean and his daughter / fiance of the guy who she's in. And so she jumps into the body. And what's really fun is, one thing I hate about this movie's Wikipedia article is it's someone, Kieran said, a film bro who goes through and explains everything to show like how much they understand the movie. And that is exactly what it is. It ruins that she stands outside of her house like practicing being human. That she has to do that for him. She has to learn his mannerisms, his tone of voice, his cadence, and then embody him. And then it turns out like he's a real jerk. And so just her bare minimum pretending to be human is like, what's gotten into you, honey?
Asking how his girlfriend's day's been and stuff, it's like, whoa, who are you? What have you done? It's my jerk boyfriend.
It then becomes the kind of story where it's like, it's humanity that's actually bad, not the zombies. It's the tech CEO Nepo kid who's actually the bad guy, and not the assassin who has a kid and wants to. It's veering a little bit into that territory.
Did you ever work out what Sean Bean's tech company actually did? Because all his workers, like the people on the factory floor, seem to be in like these VR headsets, hacking into or possessing people's webcams or security cameras, and then cataloguing what they've got on their walls and things, and what kind of curtains they've got, what brand of bedsheet they've got. So is that to sell
Amazon.
more stuff back to them?
I think it's meant to be on like how like Facebook and Google kind of watch your search histories and in the nicest way. I mean, we all know it's happening. Like they turned on kind of your microphones with your laptops and your phones. So even if you're having a random conversation halfway across the room, it's logging this in the algorithm.
We'll get an email through 2 minutes later because you talk about washing up. So, are you out of dish sponges?
That kind. I think it's meant to be a thing on that.
He's
only it's weird that they still need. Only it's weird that they'd still need human employees in order to do this.
Yeah, yeah. That kind of ages it, doesn't it? It's only 5 years old, but you think anything now is like, why would you get humans to do that work? Surely they just tap in AI for that.
I would love to see the the accompanying David Cronenberg film that's more focused on that tech company, because I'm sure he has something to rip off with that.
Yeah, all the screen, all the goggles that they have kind of melt into the person's head and they become the thing, and they just go around. It's almost like a Cronenberg version of They Live eventually.
Also, I
I tell you what, I'd pay to see that. Cronenberg does They Live.
I
Just
can't
saying.
I can't stop picturing David Cronenberg as the now I can't remember his name, but the French guy that plays him in his latest, or not him, plays the character in his latest movie that is definitely not David Cronenberg.
I haven't seen it. No, every time I think of David Cronenberg, for some reason I just think, like, why were you in the first 3 minutes of Jason X? For no reason. Anyway, this isn't David. We're on about Brad.
Yeah, no, sorry.
I just think of
Back
Jason
to-
X. Like,
Yeah, so he needs to kill them, or she does, and stuff goes wrong, and there's a malfunction in the two spirits inhabiting one body. There's a power struggle.
Yeah. The original consciousness starts fighting back, doesn't it? And
Oh yeah, and he actually he's got a great plan. He's gonna go murder her family, which is actually, that's ideal. That's exactly what Jennifer Jason Leigh wants to happen.
I don't like my family. Go ahead.
Conveniently, yeah. So that's pretty much most of the interesting stuff is in the way that their mental state is expressed through the editing and through the weird, that's where all the artsy shots are. All the montage stuff, and where finally we watch him like cut off her face and put it on as a mask, where he is now.
As they were shooting that, they just went, right, that's the poster done.
Yep. It's a better outfit than what the guy in Leslie Vernon is wearing. It's the image that drew me into the movie. It's very creepy. It's bordering on body horror, but it doesn't quite, fully go into it. It stays in its own lane. It doesn't, actually have him, possess her or put on, the face. It's just sort of representative, which is it's very nice. The surreal elements of this are done really well.
Yeah, it's sort of like a battle between a consciousness, like in the astral plane almost, isn't it? She's kind of one of her kind of undercover technicians is trying to get her back in control of the body, but she lies down.
If it was
she becomes paralyzed, and then within the mind he wanders in and basically strangles her, and then kind of implodes her face. It's like...
If it was originally a novel, they would have done it so instead of that surrealism stuff, there would just be a virtual reality generated world where the two of them kind of change into things and fight each other. And that's how you do it in like a 90s cyberpunk rip-off novel.
Thank goodness.
I know, because that's how I would do it.
Thank goodness for the language of film, taking away that literalization. No offense to what Kieran would have done.
Something like an Altered Carbon sequel, which all three Altered Carbon books are great, just saying.
And yeah, this movie, it's a lot like Pumpkinhead in the sense that there's a kid that dies in it. Yeah. This is one of the few movies where a kid is just straight up murdered on screen, very clearly in the frame, that there's not really any hiding it or editing tricks. We watch a kid die, but technically the kid is possessed by Jennifer Jason Leigh, so it's fine. It's actually an adult.
Let's add a list to the kids dying thing of Assault on Precinct 13 as well. Just in case you're making a letterboxd list.
Yes. Sam's movie is brutal in a
Pet Cemetery.
Technically a kid. I'm sure Lola's like 17 or something. Technically, kids are dying in that movie, but it's straight up a small child. And it's not that shocking for some reason to me. I forgot about it, but Yeah.
I suppose we had Orlok feeding off the kids in Nosferatu as well, didn't we, recently?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, apparently this is a future episode. Movies where kids die. Um,
God.
Oh God, that's
just
dark.
Pet Cemetery. Uh,
Hey, the kid comes back there, so it's fine.
excuse me, sometimes dead is better.
So, sometimes.
Almost like that's a tagline. Anyway,
Yeah.
no,
Um.
Possessor is good.
Yeah. Sung says as long as it's not a dog, and I agree. That's did they when they killed the dog in the Loved Ones that hit me much
Oh
harder.
God, yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I can't believe we didn't mention that. But yeah, it's so much worse than any of the brutalities handed out to people and that.
By the way, Sam, I'm glad we have all the audio of you calling the character Daddy, but apparently his name is Eric. I learned that reading about it.
Yeah, but yeah. According to Wikipedia, but he's never called that in the film. I think he's even in credits. He's Daddy Stone.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Stone.
I also say that there's a dog
No, they're
dies. I
family
think
name.
it's Lake Placid 3. I've just watched, but it's like CGI yappy, very bad. So it's like a yappy dog that you don't like, so it's vaguely okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't really have much more on this, but Sung mentioned even post-COVID, these companies are kind of crap at reaching new audiences and viewers. And I think, I mean, part of the problem, the way I would see it, is that streaming services are built so much to feed you, what content they think you want to watch, and then also what they want you to watch. So, let's say you have Paramount Plus. They're going to be feeding you their new Paramount stuff that relates to what you watch. And so if you're not watching like horror films on Paramount Plus, like I don't know what's on there that you'd be missing out on, but like it's not going to necessarily be prioritized for you unless they're tracking you across different devices and different apps and websites and things like that. But yeah, if but that's one issue with like post-COVID marketing is it's too specifically tailored, and I don't think it's great for exploration unless you're the kind of person who loves to endlessly scroll.
Or is just seeing most of the stuff that's already there.
Yeah, nobody is advertising on Netflix. Yeah, that thank goodness.
I love the fact everyone just goes, oh, there's never anything good on Netflix. We cancel your subscription. No, like then you can't complain then. Really,
They rely on your apathy, basically.
Yeah. And also, if I use a couple of streaming services with ads instead of the paid version, or it's just the whatever, that's the only version, like Tubi or something. The ads are about products. It's very rarely about getting you to watch things on the streaming service.
I mean, everything on Prime, is kind of geared to eventually lead you back to their website to order more stuff you don't need.
Should we send this link to your app? No, don't do that.
No, Possessor. I think it's fairly well known in kind of the filmic circles now, but it's definitely not very well known for the general audience, which is a shame because it is a good film. But on the other hand, maybe it's too cerebral, maybe it's too surreal, and
too elevated.
Too elevated.
I wouldn't expect it for the other two films because they're a bit older, but. Possessor, I don't think it's always been on Shudder, as a stream service, but I don't think it's been on any others, for like, pops on any other kind of prepaid services, unless you want to buy digitally individually. I mean, I think Infinity Pool is like Thought Film made it to Netflix eventually, I think, but yeah, it seems like it's happy just sitting there on Shudder, amongst all the other often quite obscure horror stuff.
And the other thing with Possessor is I haven't seen any discussion of it in the last 5 years either. It came and went. Whereas, if you're on, film Twitter, or film Reddit or whatever, and you'll get memes from movies that came out in the last 5 years, but this didn't really stick in any kind of cultural sense. It just kind of is, even if it's well received and people like it and it is good, which it is all of that, certainly.
Yeah.
I'm just doing a quick check on Google Scholar to see if there's anything on Possessor, and there is actually looking to be a few. So from somebody whose name I can't pronounce, Kotwazinska. Body/self-interrupted, necrotic transplant of Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor and Antiviral 2012. It's hard to say whether the idea really heard something in Spanish, which is about, again, Possessor, so it's in the last 5 years. Another Spanish one about Possessor. Trans George Resistance, Possessor Tangerine, Effective Trans Embodiment under Capitalism from Screen Bodies from 2023. So there are some bits in there in the academic stuff, and I think it occasionally will pop up on like Filmstagram if you happen to unfortunately be around there.
I mean, Kieran, just there you found 2 papers, and I'm sure they were published like in the wake of it.
It's only been out for 5 years. Give it a chance.
I also think that
Meow.
Oh gosh. Well, hello, cat.
Even the cat's getting annoyed. We need to wrap this one up.
Yeah, my cat's tired of us talking and wants food.
He wants to go watch Cat People.
Yes. Gosh. Well, I can't think of anything else. I do kind of wish that it took a direction of, maybe she was trying to escape. She like body, but then it might get a little too silly. Doing like Scott Bakula quantum leap kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I like the direction it took. Again, if I was able to connect with the main character a little bit better, I think I personally like it a lot more. But again, I'm somebody that always takes how do I like it versus how good it is, and try to separate the two of them out. There's obviously going to be some overlap, but I can say this is a very good film that people should check out anyway. And maybe they will connect with it a lot better than I do. Even if I don't connect with it personally, it is still a very good, very well-made piece of cinema.
Agreed.
Yep. All right. Well, that is it for this episode and Halloween. But we will be back next week.
Happy spooky season, y'all.
Yeah, we'll be back next week for something else. Until then, guys, where can people?
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film and at the Second Cut Pod Substack, where my review of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is still up. Do try and see it on a big screen if you can, everyone. I think it's at several cinemas this week. Otherwise, it'll be on Netflix next Friday, I think, Friday the 7th.
Yeah. But here's the thing: Netflix are already advertising that coming to Netflix.
Yeah.
So,
but it's just so visually kind of astounding that see it big if you can. Seriously.
Yeah. And hopefully you don't find me anywhere. If you do, I'll get judgmental in various places. My last thing for the Substack was today, when I put up a review of House of Dynamite, which Netflix did not advertise, despite the fact that they advertised pretty much everything else, and it's Catherine Bigelow who was the first female to win an Oscar for directing and broke ground and everything else. It's like, are we going to advertise this? No. Essentially, yeah, they don't care. So we'll advertise our crap far more than the stacked cast that we have in this film and everything. I don't care. But yeah, go check out that review and go check out that.
And you can find me at Jacob Film Guy. I'll go see After the Hunt this weekend, I think, finally. I can't promise I'll review it, but I will go see it because I've needed to. I just haven't had time.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, the
Happy
cat.
Halloween, y'all.
Yeah, the cat's laying on my keyboard, so that is it. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Adios. The dog ate my homework.